AI isn't just for tech bros, it's for you too. Welcome to Yella Now AI, the podcast that makes AI simple, practical, and useful for your everyday life. Whether you're juggling work, family, or just trying to get through your never-ending to-do list, AI can help, and we're here to show you how. I'm Melek, a tech executive and serial entrepreneur.
I'm Rima. I'm an author, entrepreneur, and an educator. On our show, we're going to bring you real talk, real solutions, and plenty of laughs to the AI conversation. What you're going to expect from us is unfiltered banter, personal stories, and hands-on advice that's going to help you work smarter, parent easier, and stress less, because life is busy enough. Let's just make it easier.
Yalla.
Let's go.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Yella Now AI. Rima and I are delighted to have Tameka Vasquez here with us today. Tameka is a futurist, a strategist, and an educator. And we're going to ask Tameka to give us a little background on how she got to be this multi-hyphenate person. So Tameka, take it away.
Yeah, well, great to be here and have the space to talk about things I enjoy talking about and we might take for granted sometimes. So it's great that you guys have created this space for that. How did I come into a multi-hyphenate identity? I think by just always being curious. I was a very introverted kid, and so the only way I could understand the world was through reading and just expanding my imagination and being curious. And so when you take a very shy introverted kid and then you throw them into a corporate environment, that part of you doesn't go away. And so I couldn't always fully accept the world as is because I'm deeply intuitive. I have to understand things before I can be part of them and before I understand my role in them. And so the good news about that is that it allowed me to ask questions, try things, be a bit naive in a healthy way where I don't just assume that because this is how it is now that it always has to be that way. And so it forces creativity and new ways of thinking. But I've just always been like that. And so I had a career in the tech industry for about 13 years. I was a marketing strategist helping to launch different products. And through that experience, you are seeing the world through many different angles. Like there's obviously technology, but what you're seeing is what happens like when technology is actually deployed. So you're seeing the world from like a sociological angle too. How does it change the way people think and interact and things like that? And I was raised by teachers, so I always had like a part-time job teaching. And so that kind of helps me keep my finger on the pulse of things. And so learning from students who are interacting with the world, trying to figure out their place in it, trying to figure out how they're going to have a career, but then bringing subject matter and bringing things that you can classify as best practices. Here are things that have worked maybe for me, maybe they won't work for you, but just introducing them to concepts and ways of interacting in a business environment or even beyond that helped me a lot. So all of these things I think kind of got me to a place where I'm always going to continue to ask the what ifs. I'm always going to be curious and creative. I'm always going to be in a learning environment, even if I'm not teaching, even if I'm not necessarily reading a book, just being more immersed in the world. And so the work that I do today is really about thinking about where is all this going and what might be possible, particularly if you have people with that curiosity and with that care for humanity at the helm of these conversations, what might be possible for our collective future. And that's what my work is about today as a futurist. It's all about asking those questions and trying to get a sense of how we can more intentionally design the future. So not just stumble into it, but really take the time to understand what's happening in the world today. How does that shape or redefine our understanding of the human experience? And then what might that mean in a near or distant future, whether we're here to experience it or whether it's the world that we want to leave behind? How do we now start to curate that? How do we communicate that? How do we activate that? And so that's essentially what my work is about. So that's how multi-hyphenism I think happens.
Well, you said so many things that really I feel could be an episode and a conversation in and of themselves. Not the least of which is about thinking about how did we get here and how do we shape what's to come, and understanding that from a societal lens.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I think just wanting to not necessarily get a direct answer to those questions, but wanting to wrestle with it and being comfortable with the fact that we don't know, right? And I think that is I I'm starting to attribute that to being a skill set, just learning how to navigate ambiguity and learning how to be comfortable just in unknown environments. I think that is becoming more of a skill set. Like, do you know how to sit in something that
Mm.
does not yet make sense or isn't fully developed, but then also be part of that metamorphosis, part of that evolution? Like, do we know how to do that? I think collectively, not really in a business context, but collectively as humans, I think we do because we've always been in that space of navigating the unknown. And yeah, I think now is just a time to harness some of that energy a bit more.
Tameka, what do you think if we think of sitting in ambiguity as a container,
Yeah.
right? What do you think the ingredients that need to go into it for business and business concept for leaders to be able to sit in ambiguity? Like what
Hmm.
signals that you see, like if as a futurist, when you go into an organization or into a business context that you say, okay, like there's signals here that signal to you that this is the leadership is able to withstand and withhold and sit in ambiguity, but still make a decision ultimately. What would those ingredients be?
I think my observation has led me to a few different things. I'll probably just give you three little snippets. I think one, just the ability to experience that contemplation. And I say that because a lot of leaders are expected to have the answers. And so there's just this expectation and this posturing that happens. And so I think people who are comfortable just being in a contemplative state, like they are okay sitting in a place of not yet knowing and then being able to leverage that as an opportunity to ask more questions or being able to leverage that as an opportunity to form a deeper connection with somebody else, to actually collaborate with other people. Like those are the leaders that I think we need more of. We just need more people like that because that's what allows for them to, yes, have the expectation and uphold their position as a leader, knowing that they still have to provide guidance, they still have to provide clarity. Those things are not going to go away, but their ability to simply say, you know what, I don't yet know. Let me sit and process and really start to understand, again, not just what is happening in the world, but why are these things happening? So, from a signal perspective, it's literally your ability to have discernment and have your antennas up because what happens in business environments is we feel like we are chronically behind because there's always something new and there's always something different and something that is confusing or throwing a wrench into the world that we knew to this point. And so I think what's happening now is this like deep friction where we have leaders that are not necessarily comfortable asking the what ifs. They're not even comfortable asking the why, because maybe that sense of truth is scary to them. But I think the ones that are able to contemplate with things that are nebulous or ambiguous, the ones that are able to more deeply collaborate, form those human connections to work with other people who they may not even agree with, but just me plus you equals better, right? And I think people who have that innate skill set or that desire to get better at that are better poised to deal with like the moment that we are in right now. And then I would say the third piece is probably just those who have more of an imaginative capacity as well, because I think we are in a world of such logic and reasoning. And so it's transactional. If I ask you a question, I expect an answer and then I take the answer at face value and then I implement that. But
Mm,
that's not that world of, calculation and
yeah.
just pure logic and reasoning is not consistent with what the world is asking for right now because there are things that are happening that require deeper exploration. There are things that are happening now that probably require you to go back to what you learned in philosophy 101 in undergrad, right? To really start to activate some wisdom, activate some imagination, activate like a deeper sense of interacting with the world. And so it's a lot to ask people for. None of what I'm saying is fair or, always encouraging, but it's true because that's just what the world right now is asking for. We're no longer in this assembly line structure. And so I think the leaders that are able to leverage the unknown or the ambiguity as an opportunity for better questions, an opportunity for better connection, more contemplation, like I think they're the ones that are going to get us where we need to go.
Part of what I heard you say also, Tameka, is moving away from the transactional into the more relational aspects
Yeah.
of how we interact as humans.
Yeah.
One of the things that struck me while you were talking, and again, we started the conversation talking about leaders and how this is, showing up in the workplace, but I couldn't help draw parallels with family life and relationship, human interaction, relationship life, and how, some of what's happening around us is influencing and impacting our capacity and our ability to show up in those relationships in a way that we feel comfortable being uncertain, and in a way that we feel comfortable not having all the answers of what does this need to look like for me to feel like a good partner, like a fulfilled mom, or a parent who is able to show up for their kid and be comfortable with that ambiguity, right? I think so often as leaders, whether we're in the business world leading companies and teams of people, or we're in the classroom leading the future thinkers, or we're at home with our families, there's an expectation that we should have the answers.
Yep.
Right? And we should be able to give a definitive, like you mentioned, a concrete kind of solution, when in fact, I think to what you're saying, and this is something Rima and I have talked about a fair bit, is, that ambiguity, that uncertainty is where all the magic potentially is, right? And just being candid about that uncertainty, that we're figuring it out. And I think, putting aside this kind of preconceived or, societally manufactured idea that as a leader, again, whether it's in the business setting, in the home setting, in a family dynamic, we should know all the answers at all times.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, it's redefining it.
Yeah. If you could go back 15 years and tell your younger self one thing about the future of AI, what would it be?
The future of AI specifically.
Mhm.
Ooh, honestly, it's a lot of what I'm suggesting now. I would say learn how to ask better, more insightful, and more open-ended questions. Because I think your ability to do that, the fact that you know what you're asking probably means that you've done enough of the internal work, like you have a self-awareness, so you understand what it is that you are seeking. And I think that would be my advice, truly, because again, a lot of the ways that these technologies are designed, they're still largely reliant upon repetitive and mechanical tasks.
right.
And so they're still largely baked. A lot of what's baked into it is logic and reasoning and pattern recognition and your ability to solve problems based on historical data. So, based on what's happened before, it is likely that this is probably going to be what happens next. And so the machines and the systems and tools are designed that way. And so they can foster lots of different things, and they can, get us in a place of more efficiency. They can get us to a place where it might be easier to unlock innovation because you don't necessarily have to worry about reinventing the wheel, as people like to say. But what I think we take for granted is, to the extent that it becomes a mirror and it reflects back to us where there have been gaps in our understanding, where there's any ambiguity as far as our values, or where there are still harmful biases, to the extent that it becomes a mirror back, then we really need to activate that deeper sense of contemplation. I keep coming back to that word for some reason in this conversation, but I think there is a reason. But I think it forces us to tap back into some of those innate human abilities to question, to seek out purpose, right? And to think about things through the lens of ethics, for example, which is not always right or wrong. It's not so black or white, right? Like there's more nuance. And I think my advice honestly would be to really start to think about what are the questions that you are seeking answers to. And I think people get scared by that sort of philosophical reflection, but I really think it's important that we understand what it is that we are seeking at any given time, even in this conversation. What are the things that we are seeking to learn? And then what are the things that we are seeking to provide? And to the extent that you can open more space for that kind of reflection and you can learn how to be a better question asker,
Mhm.
I think it'll serve you quite well in this era of where AI is in its development, but certainly well into the future, just as we are trying to make these machines more human, but in the process, we're actually becoming less human. And to the extent that the trends continue to persist in that direction, I think your ability to learn how to ask better questions and be curious and have that ability to reflect and understand, that's gold.
One of the things that you said, Tameka, is really a foundational reason that Rima and I created Yellow Now AI. It's the idea of allowing technology and using technology and the tools in the AI space to allow us to be more human, right? To allow us to show up for things in ways that we have been bogged down and unable to do. So, how do I outsource or dump all of this mental load that as a busy parent, professional, family, daughter, sister, we all carry so many roles with us. And every one of those roles has a list this long of the
Yeah.
tasks and things that we are managing in order to be that thing. And we want to be that thing, right? The relationships in our lives are some of the most enriching and rewarding parts of living, right? So Rima and I, this was a foundational um, decision to create this conversation, to understand the tools, the technology, the ways in which we could use them to help us show up as a better version of ourself, a more present version of ourself. So I really appreciate, all of the things that you said leading us, to that space. So with that, are there tools or are there ways in which you are utilizing technology, utilizing AI to help you in the many roles that you carry? We talked about you as a multi-hyphenate, and those are kind of work-related tasks, work-related roles. Certainly, you have a multi-hyphenate dimension to you in your relationships outside of that. So what are the things that you use that help you show up to be the best version of yourself?
Yeah. Um, I think I have come to really appreciate the organization power
Mhm.
that AI tools have offered me personally. My mind is in 100 different places at the same time. I mean, you talk about our daily to-do list, like that's one component, but also just me as like an overly analytical person. I'm also just contemplating with like a wide range of things on top of a to-do list and things like that. And so part of what I've gotten into an almost daily habit of doing now is I'll record myself brain dumping something because as I'm running errands, going to the grocery store, etc., things start to come to mind, ideas are coming to mind, and I think historically I've always dealt with the overwhelm of just having all of these tabs open in my brain at the same time. And so I've gotten to this habit now where I'll just take my phone and record myself saying the things out loud so that they're at least out of my head. And most
They've
of
been
those,
relocated.
yeah,
They've
they go
relocated.
somewhere else. And most of those voice notes don't make it into anything. But once in a while, what I do is then I upload it into, like, I use Otter, for example.
Mhm.
And so I'll just upload it into Otter and just try to make sense of what it is that I was saying. Like, what is this idea really about? And the beauty of that with having like a chat feature and things like that is it can organize your thoughts for you. And it's never going to be 100%, but it's a lot closer than I would be if I just sat down and tried to really think about, well, what are all the things I thought about this week? That's impossible for me, right? So that's a way like I use it in my day-to-day life right now, just being able to help me organize some of my thinking. I like perplexity a lot actually, because
Yeah.
I think that in the spirit of being better at asking questions, what I am seeking oftentimes is not this transactional question answer. And I think sometimes AI can be a bit, I don't know the word or the language to use here, but it's sort of like a teacher's pet in a way.
But it's been talked about as like a sycophantic,
Yeah,
Yes,
it's trigger happy. It's really
yeah,
trigger
kind of
happy.
that's
response.
exactly it.
Mhm. It
So
wants to please you.
yes, that's how it feels. At least this latest iteration of AI tools that are more generative and more conversational, like they really want to make you happy. And so they want to give you what they think you're asking for. But what happens in that environment is, again, it goes back to that sort of transactional nature. And so I like Perplexity as a search function because, for example, I'm constantly doing signal scanning research in my foresight work. So I'm helping a company, for example, think about, across all of these different emerging trends that we are analyzing, how do we start to make sense of this for your environments? Because again, it's impossible for you to keep up with all these things. So what I find is that when I interact with a tool like Perplexity, because it is a search tool, I can ask a more enriched question because I understand the nuances of what, for example, my client is seeking to answer. And so I can infuse it with a little bit more of that context and a little bit more without having to give it any personal information, but just using it as a search function that's a bit more enriching. I'm quite impressed by the abilities of a tool like that because then what it's providing back to you helps with the sense making. So it's not just, it's not Google search, right? So it's not just here's everything that is matched to the keywords that you're talking about. It's not that transactional tool. It's a bit more contextualized and a bit more nuanced. And I found it to be very helpful. Things like that. Like I'm just using that in my daily life. Um, I am into strength training and fitness and stuff like that. So not always on top of my routine. We won't judge me right
We're
now,
not, this
but
is a no judgment zone,
this is
Tameka.
no
Yeah.
judgments. It's probably been 3 weeks since I've been in that gym, but we're not going to talk about that. But one of the things I really do love doing is I do use chat tools like Chat GPT, for example, to come up with like routines that I can stick to. And so I'll just say like, hey, I'm trying to achieve these things. Like, here are things that I've done before. And like, I do that for like nutrition stuff. I do that for like fitness stuff, particularly just trying to manage like where I'm at right now. So that level of personalization is important. So for example, like, I'm dealing with like energy slumps or I'm noticing like this change in my mood and like I don't know where that's coming from, but I can start to infuse some more of those personalized aspects and like it'll spit out like a whole plan for me. So I like things like that, but those are just like some of my like quirks and things that I like to
Well,
use
I,
some
I
tools
love
for, but yeah, it's
I love
helpful.
hearing about that because again, we talk about using AI to make our lives better, right?
Yeah.
And I think the examples you shared are really very relevant use cases. Everybody cares about, how they're fueling their body, what they're putting into their body for the nutrition, and then how to make the most of the limited time that we have to show up in the gym and make it like more personalized and addressing our 3 p.m. slump or whatever is happening in our lives.
Yeah. So things like that. And I toyed around with like Midjourney and stuff like that in the early days. And I really love tools like that too, because again, like if you're in this world of speculation, like you're asking these what ifs and stuff like that, it's really cool to be able to just like mock up visuals. Cause sometimes I don't know what it is until I see it. And then just having that kind of that visual feedback, like something for you to react to, I think is really helpful for like just how my brain works, for instance. So there are all sorts of stuff that I'm just like, I'm very open and excited about, just like what you're able to do. But I think it's about curating the right stack that you can incorporate into your day-to-day life. So you're not just using a tool because everyone's using it or using it for the sake of using it. But just really thinking about like what is going to become a more ubiquitous part of your life? Like what feels more like a fluid, like what feels more like a utility in terms of like your daily routines and your daily life? That's how I think we can really take advantage of the era that we're in with the more like generative tools, for instance.
Yeah. Tameka, since we have you and you're a futurist, I can't but resist and ask this question. I can't resist asking this question. I'm around a lot of folks who are not enterprise folks, right? They're not
Yeah.
the folks in the consulting agencies. You know, they're living their daily life, and I hear this again and again. Just last week at the hairdressers, a woman came in, she had her 3 kids, another one like with her daughter, they're getting haircuts. And the AI seems to be the topic every time I'm in a space like this. There's a lot of fear mongering, like, oh my God, what future are they going to look forward to? AI is going to replace their jobs, but AI, and I've heard you say this in some of your writings, like that it's not born yesterday. This is not something that just happened. So can you address that? Give us some historical context just to lower people's anxieties and they can interact in a way that offers that space of contemplation. This seems to be our word for today.
Yeah.
Contemplation, critical sense making. These are the second word, and relationality. So
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I totally understand like why people are afraid. And I think a lot of it is also because, we've been subconsciously fed with media that puts man versus machine many times, right? And so I think that imagery over time, it does permeate and it does create like a bias where we just assume that there's a bad intention or that the presence of these things means the end of a sort of era or the end of humanity or, all of these kind of broad-based, fear-based speculations. But I think it's important for people to understand like the terminology artificial intelligence is not new. And the function itself is also not new. We are just in a place where the generative components are like the machines are just capable of mirroring more human-like thinking patterns. And so that piece is new. But you go back to the 1950s, the 1960s, these are some of the foundational times of thinking about data differently, looking at just how much information was being put into the world and codifying that information. So trying to figure out how do we create structures and systems for that information to live in. And then you match that with like computing power. And
right.
so even far back in the 1950s and 60s when people didn't even have computers at their disposal, right? Like this wasn't a part of everyday life. Even from back then, people were thinking about what if machines could think? Like, what if machines could do some of the things that we're doing? And I think
Mhm.
it's important to also understand it from an industrial revolution perspective, because you're also talking about a time period where more and more people were leaving factories and farms and that sort of more isolated work where they were either on an assembly line, quite literally, doing these very mechanical, repetitive tasks, or they were in these kind of agricultural spaces where, I mean, you had to hunt for your food essentially, right? Like you took care of like a small family or a small village and things like that. And so on the back of that, and then you match that with also where we were culturally, at least in the Western world, we were in this era of civil rights and all of this stuff. And so you basically have this argument that's happening at a societal level that says, hey, this is what it means to be human, right? And here are what human beings are capable of. And now there's more humans because, all of the efforts to integrate Black people, for example, different immigrant groups that were in the country, and this conversation was starting to take shape in the most painful ways, but all of this stuff was happening at the same time. So you just had more people. So how do we now create opportunities to leverage people to their highest and best use? And so for the most part, we still had at that point, and we still have today, what is considered to be this sort of like working class, right?
Mhm.
And we have populations of people who still do work that we consider to be quite repetitive, work that you can be trained on and you can sort of get into the rhythm of, and you can do almost the same thing every day. We still have that, but that was really pervasive back at the time when we started thinking about the power of machines and computing and all of these things. And so what we were basically able to do, fast forward, is start to simulate aspects of human intelligence into these various machines. And then that just becomes smarter and smarter over time. And that's basically what's happened. And so when you fast forward, you take basic clerical tasks, next thing you know, machines are learning, they're becoming more sophisticated, they can solve these puzzles, they can apply this logic, they can deal with a narrow set of problems, and then you just start to infuse that more and more. So it's kind of like a child. It's like the minute you realize this child can learn, then you start thinking about, well, what more can I give them to enable that learning journey? What more can I give them that's maybe more complicated, right? And then we get into the world of where we are today, which is basically algorithmic systems. It's machines that have the same kind of patterns that we have in our human brain. So they have these networks that are basically connecting ideas, data, all of these things together. And then it just becomes more embedded into our daily lives. And so I don't know if that's the most effective explanation, but I just want people to understand the capability is not new, but the ubiquitous nature, the way that it's now become so integrated into our lives that you probably don't even notice most of the apps on your phone already had this kind of power within them. They were already leveraging a lot of what we now understand to be artificial intelligence. So, you were getting that in your search results, you were getting that in your social media feeds. It's not an accident, right? The technologies are learning your behavioral patterns the more you use these things. Your GPS is literally machine learning, right? Like it can pick up on what you're trying to achieve and where you're trying to go, and it can predict patterns and all of these things. These capabilities are not new. We've been using them, but I think now we're confronting it in a different way because now the capabilities are much more advanced because they've been building off of, 60, 70 years worth of data and information and different forms of knowledge. And so where we are is an advanced sort of space. And then we also just have more electrical capability and things like that. So it's just so much more widespread that I think now people are confronting it in a different way. And then, of course, some of these more conversational tools are making people realize, like, oh, wow, like this thing kind of feels like a human or maybe just like
Yeah.
magic. So I think we're just contending with it in a different way. Sorry if that was like too much information.
Great. I love the background. You're a pretty phenomenal storyteller, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was quite a journey to go on to hear about kind of the origins and what led to where we are today in a really contextualized way that I'm not sure I've heard that presented in that way before. So thank you. I'm sure our audience will also really appreciate that background and helping them to synthesize this really transformative kind of experience that we're all having. And that's, really one of the things that Rima and I had hoped for this episode, this conversation, is to help our audience get their kind of grounding,
Yeah.
get some, sense of how did we get here? Okay, like what happened to get us here and where do we go from here? Like how do we equip ourselves? What are the ways? Where do we fit in with all of these things in a way, again, to help us show up better versions, available for more of the human experience than we may have been able to previous to these different tools being as readily available and spoken about as they are now.
Yeah, because I think we just also just live in a more digitized environment. And I think that's another layer that maybe people don't really realize. Like they've been using AI probably for the last 10 to 15 years as part of their daily life. But at the same time, we're also just spending more time in these digital interfaces. And I think that's what adds to a layer of complexity. And also that I think is what fuels a lot of the fear. So to the extent that I supported someone in helping them to understand some of the history and some of the context, amazing. But there's so much more that I think we will all be learning in the years to come. And that's why, for me, this is really an opportunity to talk about what we're designing. Like, what world do we want to live in? There are things that machines can do, but it doesn't necessarily mean they should. And I think we get to design that. We get to choose how that shows up. And industry, enterprise, that is one big, powerful piece of the conversation, but nothing, industry and enterprise level conversations cannot move without the zeitgeist. Like, they just can't move
Mhm.
without us in our everyday lives, like as consumers,
Yeah.
as the drivers of culture, and the things that become normalized are largely us and the things that we agree to, right? So I think we're in a time now where we just have to ask the question, like, what world are we trying to design? And are there aspects that we are comfortable sending over, outsourcing essentially to AI capabilities, AI tools? And are there parts that we really need to start to conserve and preserve for the purposes of human flourishing? I think we get to ask that question in a different way now.
Tameka, again, you've been so generous with your thoughts, your ideas, and your insights. I can imagine that, our audience is going to have to maybe listen and really reflect and contemplate about the world that we are living in, and what is that world in the future? What do we want it to look like? And how do we show up and make it known what we care about? Like you said, I think that's also an important part. Like, we're the consumers, we're the end users, and we get to have some say if we choose to participate in certain tools and available kind of solutions or not.
Yeah, exactly. We get to design this.
Okay, well, we're going to shift gears a little bit and move into the part of our show that we ask all of our guests to help our audience get a little, different dimension, different side of you. So the first thing we'd like to ask you is to do our fetish series. So tell us, what's in your bag?
Oh my gosh, I don't even have my bag next to me, but here's what's always in my bag: my glasses,
Okay.
sunglasses, lip gloss. Summer Friday is my brand. Um, I only have one card, so I carry my credit card, and I usually have like these little, I do like mini notebooks, like little
Yeah.
notebooks, and AirPods, right? That's what they're called.
Yeah.
Um,
I want to ask you about the notebook. Is it like just a regular pen
yeah.
paper, or is it like a remarkable or?
Just regular, good old pen and paper. Most of the time, I still take notes by hand. So
Yep. Same.
I do the same thing. So that's why I'm always
I'm a,
curious.
I'm a dinosaur. I'm always writing, always writing.
if I don't write it, I won't remember it. So
All right. One thing you mentioned, a couple of tools, but doesn't have to be in the tool space. One thing generally that's making your life better right now.
what is making my life better right now? Nature, always nature.
So,
I go hiking as often as possible. That is always going to be, you got to put your hand in the dirt. Like, you just have to. That's always going to make my life better. I think also, just honestly, I mean, we just had a whole conversation about tech, so I feel
yeah.
terrible saying this, but honestly, just putting my phone away and going for a walk with a friend or having coffee with a friend, like just
Real. That's so
one-on-one
real to me,
conversation,
Kels. I,
truly,
and
it
you know
just
what?
makes me happy.
I feel the same way. I feel like I conduct these little experiments with myself of like, okay, I'm going to go out, and I feel so light going out without the phone. I can't do it often, and I can't do it during the normal day when my people are
Yeah.
awake out in the world. And, there's always this fear of like, what if something happens and they can't reach me?
Yeah,
But
I mean, I don't know, maybe it's my privilege because I don't have kids yet, but that's what my husband and I do almost every day. We leave our phone, we go for a walk, and sometimes we bump into people. And I'm always like, what if we had our phones? Like, I don't know if we would have noticed, like, oh, that's so and so across the street. We saw
Yeah.
them at this other event. And he's a very extroverted person. I'm very introverted, but just that little moment of like, oh, you just saw a familiar face and you walk over and you're chatting it up. And there's just like an organic nature to that and a serendipity to that that I just don't think we have when we're just locked in to our phones. Like you just don't even notice that it's happening. So I relish and savor opportunities to just leave my phone and like just be a human being in the world.
Love that. I love that. I love those moments too when I get to have them too. I'm sure Rima, you have younger people, so probably harder for you, but
Yes. But when I'm able to have those moments of solitude, they're everything for me. It's how I recharge, it's how I ground. So I can take care of all those little people that are in my
Yes.
little people that are in my
Yeah.
life.
Can't
So
pour from an empty cup. So you gotta
no.
fill the cup however you do.
yeah. So Tamika, we ask also every guest to share with us what's their favorite snack.
Uh, I'm weird. I like okra chips. I like uh peanut butter filled pretzels. Like
Ooh.
I'm like a random weird snack person.
I have to
Those
say,
are
I've
some
never heard of
favorites.
the okra chips.
They're
That's
so good. They're a problem. They need to stay away from me.
well, they need to find me
Okra,
because
okra chips,
Okra
okra.
chips.
Oh,
Yeah.
I've had the crispy. Are you talking about the crispied okra? Is that the
Yeah.
one? Those
Yeah.
are so good.
They're so
I
good.
They're so yummy.
have no idea what you're both referring to, so I need to have
Yeah,
those okra chips find me.
yeah, yeah,
When you do, let us know.
I have
It's
to report
addictive.
back.
They're so light, but they're like
yeah.
that's just become my go-to snack these days. They're just very
And
addictive.
then and it's also void of guilt. When I actually eat them, I don't feel guilty. I'm like, ooh, this is me doing good to my
Healthy.
okra. I'm eating okra.
It's
I'm
the best
definitely going to
thing.
look for
Yeah.
those.
Oh my God.
Well, Tamika, it's been an absolute enriching and really enjoyable conversation. We can't thank you enough. We wish you continued success and tell our audience if they wanted to learn more about you and find you, where can they do that?
Yeah, I am pretty accessible on LinkedIn or Instagram if you find me there. Tameka Vasquez anywhere. I don't think there's another one. So if you look me up, you will find me. And yeah, always happy to chat and keep conversations going and meet strangers. So feel free to reach out anytime.
Thank
Awesome.
you. This was a treat. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Tamika. All right. And now it's time for our Zahruta. This week, I'd like to call out Corinne Lowe. Corinne is a PhD and professor at the Wharton School in Economics, and she has a book called Having It All. I first came to know about Corinne through an interview that she did with The Cut, talking about how women face this unbalanced and ever-growing burden of managing life outside of the workplace with household, with children, with family, and the data that backs it all up, and why it is, and hopefully some of the things we can do to change that. I'm really excited to hear more from her and her research, and I have to give it to her for calling it out.
Absolutely. I'm super excited as well. And one of the reasons I'm excited is that it's going to be evidence-based. It's based in data.
Yeah. And, again, looking at who we are and why we're doing what we're doing, we live those challenges. We live that experience on a day to day. And the fact that there's data to show it, I mean, not that we need that, we know what our lived experience is, but I think that just helps move the conversation in a more meaningful way towards tangible change.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well said, Minette.